I remember the color of the rain that night. Monsoon rain isn't clear and sweet. It comes dense and alive with everything that's swept off the streets. Wild green streaking the gutters, garbage pressed to the curbs, the ink from old newsprint swirling at my feet as I stepped across the lane outside the Chowpatty Gallery. Even 10 years later, I still feel it in my shoulders, that loaded, sodden anger, the night my life first spun south. My violin case was heavy. Heavier than it ever felt walking through the chawl where Amma raised me and my sister Priya. Now it was ridiculous. That's the word the owner of the gallery used. Exquisite carpentry, Arjun. But a gallery isn't the place for, a violin. These aren't works for show, no? It's a bit ridiculous. He was careful, gentle, tilting the instrument in the rime of gallery light, as though indulging a child's craft project. He bent at the waist, white kurta floating around his ankles, the tilt of his head seeking the right word. Ridiculous. I recognized the faces behind him, faces from Andheri and Ghatkopar, even someone from my own building who worked as a clerk for the electric board, his eyes dropping when they caught mine. People sipped wine, eyeing the instruments lined on the table, a veena, a battered tabla, and my violin, by far the finest thing I'd made. When the crowd shifted, the gallery owner laid the violin back beside the others, carelessly. He didn't meet my eyes when he said, "Perhaps something more conventional next time." No invitation to return. Just the sly ripple of snickers, the certainty that everyone had agreed this was foolish, a waste. I knew those faces would remember, and so would I. I slipped away, past banners pasted crooked on wet walls, past the traffic where rainwater hammered the ribs of the city. And inside, all the words that should have fought their way out just curled tighter. Sometimes rage comes out spilling, but that was not my way. I swallowed mine, felt it filling my chest with an ache and a weight as I sheltered in the shadow of a shuttered pawn shop and waited out the violence of the clouds. Home was worse, as home so often is when the city has turned you out. My sister met me at the door, her eyes flicking to my soaked kurta and muddy hands. They didn't like it, did they? She knew, of course. Amma was louder, bustling behind the kitchen curtain, pretending not to watch, her voice raised. Of course they didn't. Why would they? A violin, Arjun, in a gallery? Who will pay to just look at it? Sell it in a music shop if you must make such things. Better go back to working with your uncle. Good, honest furniture. I said nothing. I carried the violin to our room, propped in the corner, and sat between the old trunk and the cracked window, numb to the calls for dinner. None of them walked in. Priya left a cup of chai by the door, softening the ache between us. But even that tasted cold and thin that night. The faux heat of shame waited for me in the coming days. Every neighbor on the third floor had seen someone's cousin at the gallery, or else had heard about my failure. My uncle shook his head. Shifting sawdust in the workshop, customers glanced at me, then at his plywood display, and I caught the whispers through cheap partitions. Even the chaiwala laughed in that offhand way. Make a sitar at least, Arjun. Not some foreign thing, eh? I won't call what came next despair. It was a narrower thing, resentment at the city and at my own blood, who measured worth against gossip and tiny triumphs. A man could rise selling phone covers on the local train and be a hero, but the work I'd studied for years, the work that made me alive at the bench, just rubbish. Maybe the city infected me too. For months, I barely touched my tools. My hands found excuses, gluing the loose railings of our balcony, fixing the leaking tap, smoothing dinner table edges for small pay. The violin grew dusty in its corner. It took Priya's quiet anger to draw me out. "Why do you let them decide?" she said, kneeling beside where I sulked at the window, refusing food and friends. "You loved that violin. You used to play, you know? Even if bad music, you played. Her fingers brushed my shoulder, steady. Let me hear it, just once. That old anger filled me again, heavier than ever. Don't ask me, I said, sharper than I meant. She didn't move, just sat with knees pressed to her chest, silent. For so long it made me listen for what she would say. Finally, she stood, not unkind. You're not making music, Arjun, not even with wood. She left the room, but her words scraped at me for days. I knew she was right. I watched the passages of monsoon outside the window, watched children in the rain knock together plastic cars, and something in me wanted to try again. I dusted off the violin, ran my thumb over the seam. Flaws in the purfling, a barely perceptible warp. Maybe they were right to laugh. Yet I slid the bow, drew one long note. Rough, but alive. The rage receded, leaving only stubbornness. I quit my uncle's workshop quietly, taking my last wages in cash, refusing his lecture about practical skills. By night, I worked at a delivery job. By day, I studied books from the rare library on Nepean Sea Road, copying diagrams from Italian masters, tracing old drawings by candlelight. Sometimes, I played half-finished instruments to the empty flat, apologizing to Priya for the racket. Play, she always said, as if I were giving her something priceless. Those were lean, private years. I lived mostly in silence, planing maple at dawn, scraping spruce until my fingers bled. My hands grew expert, not from grand ambition, but the refusal to quit, not after being shamed so publicly. On Fridays, still soaked in sweat, I'd walk to Juhu Beach and listen to the buskers. Sometimes they played battered violins, out of tune but stubbornly beautiful. I envied their freedom. The turning point was luck disguised as disaster. My third violin, the one I finally thought worthy to sell, was dropped, smashed in a delivery van amidst cheap boxes. I sat alongside the shattered case at the side of the road, hands shaking, years' work undone in one careless collision. I was ready to throw everything away when a voice spoke behind me. Is that a violin? It was a foreigner, a French musician, Emmanuel, bent with the same hopeful posture I used to have. He asked permission, gently, as if the ruin were precious, and I let him lift the broken body from the debris. He cradled the violin, then looked at the scroll, the edges. You made this? I nodded, and for the first time in years, I saw the instrument through someone else's eyes, not as a failed art project, but as an artifact, something struggling to live. He took my number. If you fix it, bring it to the auditorium, he promised. There are people who might be interested. Hope in Mumbai always appears when least expected. I spent everything on glue and clamps, searching scraps for matching wood. Days of work restored some of the soul to the violin. I brought it trembling and unfinished to the back entrance of the Music Academy near Nariman Point. Emmanuel met me, ushered me into small hallways, fragrant with resin and sweat, toward a group of musicians rehearsing for a festival. He didn't introduce me with fanfare, only handed my repaired violin to a British violinist, Rachel, who ran her thumb along the neck, then began to play. The sound, dusky, low, imperfect but utterly alive, filled the cracked practice room. The musicians fell silent, listening. When Rachel finished, she covered her mouth in surprise. This is remarkable! Did you apprentice in Cremona, in Italy? I laughed, then bit my tongue, because she was serious. Emmanuel told her, and later others, where I'd learned chawl streets, from old books, from my father's broken sitar, and 1,000 failures. The musicians insisted I attend the festival. I watched from the wings as on stage they played my instrument, weaving Bach with bits of ragas, foreign and local melodies blending through its wooden body. That night, I wept into my hands. a mixture of rage and relief washing through me. The next week, Rachel asked to commission a violin. Soon, a cellist from Vienna did the